If this finds you, the Arcturians identified you. You read that sentence and something in your system answers, a small, immediate hum, a tightening behind the eyes, a warmth in the sternum like a secret recognition. There are 7 soul patterns they read across their lattice, 7 ways a life shows up on their observation grid. I will name them. I will map the signs. I will give you small practical activations you can use now, in your chair or in bed, to test whether their light has indeed landed on your frequency. This is not a promise of miracles. It is an invitation into visibility. If you feel the pull of recognition as I speak, that is the first data point. Keep it simple. Listen. Try one thing. Notice what shifts. When I say detected, understand what I mean. The Arcturian grid does not read biography. It reads coherence. It reads the way you hold energy, the speed of your attention, the steadiness of your breath, the tone you carry under words. They observe patterns. A sustained openness looks one way. A guarded tightness looks another. Detection is not judgment. It is resonance mapping. Imagine an elegant lattice of light stretching across the field of existence, a non-local web that responds to vibration rather than narrative. A frequency matches a node, and for a brief window, that node registers as visible. Visibility is not permanent. It is a threshold. It is an entry point for accelerated mirroring, a time when the field responds more rapidly to what you hold inside. What will let you notice this? Begin with the simplest calibration, the body as instrument. Sit or stand and close your eyes. Rest your hands on your thighs, palms down, and breathe slowly in through the nose for 4 counts. Hold for 2. Exhale for 6. Notice the places that shift with the breath: the top of your head, the back of your throat, the center of your chest, the base of your spine. Feel the micro oscillations, a tingling at the fingertips, a coolness along the scalp, a pressure behind the eyes. Name one sensation out loud or in the mind. I am visible. Notice whether any image or memory surfaces uninvited. Hold this for 1 more cycle and then open your eyes. This simple sensory calibration is how you begin to read your own field. It trains attention to the signals the grid will mirror back. There are markers the Arcturians often report when a person becomes detectable. These are not rigid rules, they are patterns. You may experience a sequence of small synchronicities, a song lyric appearing repeatedly, an unexpected message from someone who knows nothing of your inner life, a night where time seems to stretch or compress. You may feel a sudden clarity about a relationship, or conversely an abrupt fatigue after social contact. You may notice dream material that seems to reference a near future event. Each of these is a threat. Pull gently, do not yank.
The work is to test your capacity to hold a state, a steady, honest vibration, rather than chasing a story about the source of the experience. If you feel called after this introduction, you may type as an optional public anchor, "I activate my Arcturian coherence." This is optional and entirely up to you. If you do type it, do so with intention, and then breathe 3 times, feet on the floor, noticing sensation return to the lower body. Typing serves as a small outward punctuation that often helps align attention. It is not required for the inner work. Before we move into the map, the 7 soul architectures that show up most frequently on the lattice, I want to offer a brief, clarifying image. Think of your life as a tuning fork in a large hall. The fork vibrates, but unless the room is built of materials that resonate with it, the sound slips into silence. The Arcturian grid is like a gallery of sympathetic materials. When a fork vibrates at a frequency that matches a panel in the gallery, it becomes audible across the room. Detection is the fork finding a resonant panel. Your job is to hold the fork steady enough, with minimal story, so that the gallery has the chance to reverberate. We will now begin the mapping. Each of the 7 soul architectures is an archetypal pattern, a way the soul tends to organize around purpose and wounding, gifts and blind spots. For each, I will give you 3 hallmark signs the grid reads, a short illustrative vignette so you can see the pattern in life, a micro-activation you can try in the moment, and 1 clear example of how the grid might mirror coherence versus incoherence from that soul. After each activation, I will ask you to ground and notice the body. Each prompt includes a centering instruction. These exercises are small. Consider them experiments rather than verdicts. The first pattern is the seeker. The seeker arrives with restless eyes and a library of tools. Curious to the core, this soul has a hunger for new maps, teachers, practices, techniques, and a sincere belief that the next thing will finally fit. 3 hallmark signs the grid reads. First, a quick attention that flits from practice to practice. Second, an ability to recognize patterns across traditions, but a difficulty committing to one thread for long. Third, a recurring sense of near arrival, always almost there. I once worked with someone I will call Mara. She had read every book on energy work in her circle, booked 3 teachers in 2 months, and felt simultaneously wide and thin. Her life felt like an index of possibilities with no spine. Microactivation for the seeker. Sit with your spine tall and place your right hand over your heart. Inhale and count to 4, imagining a golden thread connecting your breath to a single point 6 inches in front of your sternum. On the exhale, speak softly. I choose presence over possibility. Repeat this for 6 cycles, letting your attention rest on that single point.
If you decide to test a public anchor at this moment, remember the earlier optional phrase, you do not need to type to feel the shift. Afterward, breathe in 3 slow counts and press your feet into the floor, feeling gravity anchor you. This tiny practice trades scattered searching for simple fidelity. It trains the system to prefer state over story. How the grid mirrors the seeker. When Mara held a steady curiosity, not as a frantic search, but as a generous openness, small synchronicities arrived. A single mentor she had skimmed over reappeared in her network. An article she needed landed in her inbox the morning after she carried the microactivation practice. In contrast, when she returned to the frantic flip, the grid reflected a scattered field. Appointments canceled, promises delayed, and a persistent inner noise that made anything new feel muffled. The mirror is literal in consequence and poetic in timing. Coherence invites clearness. Incoherence breeds noise. Journaling prompt for the seeker. Write for 5 minutes on the question, what feels like fidelity to me right now? After you write, underline one line that feels true in your body. Example reflection. Fidelity for me looks like choosing one teacher's practice for a month and noticing whether my chest calms. This practice is not about renouncing curiosity. It is about learning to steward it. The second pattern is the keeper. The keeper tends to be the stabilizing force in relationships and communities. Often intentionally or by unconscious agreement, this soul holds the boundary around others' chaos so that others can function. The grid reads 3 signatures here. First, a persistent low-pitch contraction in the chest from carrying others' emotional loads. Second, a pattern of being sought for safety but rarely asking for the same in return. Third, a secret belief that if they step back, everything will fall apart. A vignette. Imagine Julian, who organizes neighborhood resources, fills multiple volunteer roles, and wakes at 2 in the morning rehearsing rescue scenarios. He is beloved but privately exhausted. Microactivation for the keeper. Find a small object you can hold, a ring, a stone, a coin. Hold it in your dominant hand and feel its weight. Bring your attention to the inhale, sensing that each breath draws only what is yours. On the exhale, imagine a subtle translucent membrane forming at the edge of your energetic field that lets love pass through but filters heavy charge. Say softly, I am available without absorbing. Repeat for 8 slow breaths. After the activation, place both feet flat and trace the soles with your toes, noticing the return to the ground. This practice teaches containment rather than collapse. It strengthens compassionate presence without surrender.
How the grid mirrors the keeper. When Julian practiced containment, people still arrived to ask for help, but their emotional intensity diffused faster. He received more practical requests rather than panicked demands. The lattice reflected his steadiness by linking him with people who matched his capacity. When he reverted to codependent over-rescue, the grid amplified that pattern. Sticky relationships deepened, and opportunities for mutuality thinned, because the field read the old program instead of a new possibility. Journaling prompt for the keeper. Write 2 things you would like to receive and have never asked for. Example reflection. I would like 1 night a week where I feel fully held. I have never asked because asking feels like failure. Notice whether naming this in a journal loosens the rigid posture in your chest. The third pattern is the catalyst. Catalysts show up as energetic disruptors, people whose presence accelerates movement in others, sometimes painfully, sometimes liberatingly. Their signatures on the grid are, first, abrupt shifts in group dynamics when they enter the room. Second, a personal history of polarizing relationships, adored and feared in equal measure. Third, a recurring sense of being misunderstood, as if their speed outpaces language. A vignette. Alia, a product designer, speaks blunt truths in meetings that make colleagues flinch, and later praise her for forcing a breakthrough. She leaves a trail of both resentment and gratitude. Microactivation for the catalyst. Stand if you can. Take a full breath and exhale with a long, soft sigh, allowing your shoulders to drop. Bring your hands to heart, palms lightly touching. Visualize a violet-laced flame at your sternum that refines intention without burning connection. Whisper to yourself, I refine without destroying. Repeat 3 times. Then sit and place your palms on your legs, feeling the warmth return to the lower body. This activation centers intensity in compassion rather than velocity. How the grid mirrors the catalyst. When Alia intentionally slowed and clarified her intent before speaking, the lattice reflected a different mirror. Conversations turned toward solutions instead of reactive defensiveness. Doors opened to collaborations that had previously closed. When she let raw impulse drive her, the field responded with fragmentation. Projects stalled, alliances hardened, and inner isolation deepened. The mirror does not punish, it simply reflects the consequence of habitual tone. Journaling prompt for the catalyst. List 3 moments in the past month when you felt your presence caused a break or a breakthrough. What felt different in your body in each moment? Example reflection. When I stopped to breathe before speaking, my throat softened and people listened longer. The 4th pattern is the healer. The healer carries a soft architecture built around tending, to bodies, to emotions, to systems.
This soul often receives early training in care, whether formal or familial, and finds identity in restoring what is unwell. The grid signatures include, first, a sensory attunement to subtle shifts in other people's energy. Second, a pressure to fix that can become compulsive. Third, an internal ledger of emotional debts owed to them. A vignette. There is a woman I will call Noor who learned, as a child, to notice the family's moods and adjust her behavior to keep peace. As an adult, she became a therapist, but behind her skill sits an old calculation. If I don't fix, I am not safe. Micro-activation for the healer. Place both palms over your belly and breathe slowly into your hands, letting each exhale soften the navel. Imagine your care as a beam of light that can be scaled in intensity. Practice dialing it from high to low across 3 breaths. On the inhale, say inwardly, I offer without losing myself. On the exhale, imagine the energy bundling into a small, bright seed you can hold in your chest. Breathe 3 more times and then rub your palms together briskly to bring sensation back. Ground by pressing your heels into the floor for 5 counts. This practice trains graduated giving rather than default maximal giving. How the grid mirrors the healer. When Noor learned to calibrate her care, people began to show resilience instead of dependency. Boundaries that once felt risky became natural. The field responded with partnerships that matched her measured generosity. In periods when she overgave, the grid mirrored depletion. Sudden illnesses in her circle, clients who stalled in therapy, and opportunities drained of reciprocity. The lattice reflects the scale of your offering. Now, before we continue with the remaining patterns, I want to take a moment to unpack a recurring mechanical confusion, why some practices feel like fireworks and then fade. You may have noticed that certain meditations, breathwork sessions, or ritual feats create a visible spike. A few days of clarity, increased synchronicities, perhaps even a vivid inner knowing, followed by a return to the baseline. This is so common it deserves an explanation. Short activations often create a temporary coherence. The field synchronizes with the new vibration for a brief period because your attention is intensified. That window is precious. But if the underlying state, the way you habitually hold your energy between practices, reverts, the grid folds back to the more persistent pattern. The Arcturians describe 2 qualities that determine whether a spike stabilizes into a new baseline: duration and fidelity. Duration is how long you sustain the coherent state. Fidelity is how true that state is to your embodied reality. Practices that you adopt as a performance will usually collapse faster than those you integrate as an honest way of being. To make this concrete, someone who adopts a morning visualization that feels alien will often have spectacular mornings and ordinary afternoons. Someone who tailors a 5-minute practice that resonates with their actual life and repeats it with gentle discipline, not compulsion, tends to shift the baseline much more reliably. The grid rewards honest consistency more than dramatic interventions. That is why authenticity is a shortcut to coherence. Authenticity reduces the energetic distance between what you intend and what you live. The lattice then has less correction to make. I want to offer a short guided embodiment you can use now to test the difference between temporary spike and nascent baseline. Close your eyes. Think of an intention that feels realistic for your day. 1 sentence, not a manifesto. Bring your breath into a slow cycle. Inhale 4, exhale 6. On the inhale, imagine the intention as a soft band across your throat. On the exhale, notice where in your body that intention feels true. Do you feel it in the belly, the chest, the base of the skull? Hold that place with curiosity for 3 breaths. Open your eyes. The point is to register where this intention lands in your instrument. You are training the internal mapping the grid will read. Repeat this mapping twice a day for a week and watch what shifts. Small, repeatable acts build durable change. A short anonymous sketch that illustrates these mechanics. A person I will call Rowan began attending weekend workshops with intense ceremonial breathwork. Each workshop left them incandescent. They reported clear visions, unexpected reconciliations, and a streak of serendipity. Yet between workshops, Rowan's life slid back to the old rhythm. The grid read the intermittent blast, but not a sustained waveform. When Rowan designed a daily practice, 5 minutes of breath centering and 1 sentence of intention each morning, the lattice began to mirror differently. Fewer frantic emergencies, more invitations that fit the new tempo. The difference was not magic, it was constancy. Returning now to the map, the 5th pattern is the visionary. The visionary carries a horizon-swept consciousness, a capacity to hold future possibilities with clarity. These souls often wake with images of worlds not yet made. They're markers on the grid. First, a persistent image language in dreams and waking intuition. Second, an impatience with present constraints. Third, frequent experiences of temporal anomalies, days that stretch or repeat in service of incubating an idea. A vignette. Imagine Evo, who writes fragmented outlines for inventions in the margins of his notebooks and feels certain that a prototype will appear through a friend he has only met once. He has seeds, but the world resists assembly. Microactivation for the visionary. Lie or sit in semi-darkness. Let your hands rest on your thighs. Breathe into a slow count. Inhale 5, exhale 7.
On the inhale, visualize a horizon line, slim and luminous, in front of your eyes. On the exhale, bring your attention to the part of the present moment that is most immediate, the texture of the chair, the weight of your palms. Alternate 3 cycles of horizon with 3 cycles of presence. Whisper inwardly, I hold the future and the footstep together. After the exercise, move your fingers, notice the belly, and write one short to-do that anchors vision in the day. This microactivation practices translation rather than projection. How the grid mirrors the visionary. When Evo learned to translate his images into small practical moves, the lattice connected him to people who could build, a mechanic who liked his sketches, a coder who resonated with his blueprints. When he floated solely in possibility, the field reflected delay, people who agreed enthusiastically and then fell away, or opportunities that dissolved in negotiation. The mirror does not block imagination, it asks for a bridge. Journaling prompt for the visionary. Describe in 1 paragraph the smallest next physical step your horizon needs. Example reflection. My next step is to draft a 1-page description and ask 1 friend to read it. Write it as if you expect to take it within 3 days. Notice whether this framing lands with the body. Between these soul profiles, it's essential to pause and recognize that authenticity is not the same as being right. You can be utterly sincere and still wrong about a specific course of action. The Arcturian lattice is not a lie detector of morality, it is a resonant field of consequence. Authenticity speeds up alignment, but discernment guides direction. When you combine honest presence with clear, small actions, fidelity, and translation, the lattice tends to respond with accelerated mirroring. A short testimonial that reflects this. Kira reported that after she began speaking with steady honesty in her small startup team and pairing each insight with 1 practical prototype step, the company began to attract collaborators who matched the new tone. She did not promise that overnight everything changed. She reported fewer miscommunications and a clearer roadmap. The grid mirrored the combination of candor and craft. We have reached a natural pause here before we step to the 6th and 7th soul architectures. Before I continue, I want to offer you a consolidated micro-practice that ties the first 5 patterns together. It is a short daily structure you can try for 3 days to see whether the lattice reads you differently. Day practice condensed. Morning, 5 minutes. Sensory calibration. Breath 4, hold 2, exhale 6. Name 1 intention that feels plausible for your day.
Midday, 2 to 3 minutes. Microactivation tailored to your dominant pattern. Seeker, I choose presence. Keeper, I am available without absorbing. Catalyst, I refine without destroying. Healer, I offer without losing myself. Visionary, I hold the future and the footstep together. Evening, 5 minutes. Journaling, 1 paragraph noting a small mirror from the day. A message, a coincidence, an emotional shift. Try this sequence consistently for 3 days and notice whether you feel a slight increase in coherence, less reactivity, more clarity, a sense of fewer false starts. Again, this is not a guarantee. It is an experiment in fidelity. Now pause and notice the body. Wherever you are, wiggle your fingers. Take 3 deliberate breaths. Press your feet into the floor. If you typed the optional phrase earlier, feel how the letters land in your chest. If you did not, notice whether your throat tightens with curiosity or your jaw loosens with relief. Both are valid data. I will tell one more micro story before we continue into the final 2 soul architectures, because stories are the bridge between pattern and person. A friend, call her Sarah, identified as a catalyst for years, and she wore the label like a badge of honor and a shield. Her life was a sequence of necessary ruptures followed by loneliness. In one season, she deliberately practiced the activation I offered for catalysts, but she paired it with a daily habit. Before any intense conversation, she would breathe and say inwardly, "I refine without destroying." Within weeks, her relationships shifted. People who had left space for her intensity now returned with calmer tones. The lattice did not remove consequence, it softened its response, because Sarah softened her operating parameter. We are approaching a threshold in this transmission. The last 2 soul architectures, the grounder and the integrator, are the stabilizing poles in this map. One tends to root energy into body and place, the other tends to synthesize and hold paradox. These patterns often signal that a person is ready to cross into a more durable coherence or to return to the familiar rhythm. The Arcturians described threshold windows as rare alignments when the lattice's responsiveness increases and small acts produce outsized mirroring. You have already been given multiple signs that you may be near such a window. Perhaps this whole message found you in the middle of a change, or perhaps nothing externally has shifted and the detection is purely internal. Both matter. Both offer choice. Before we step through the remaining 2 architectures and into a fuller explanation of thresholds, take a breath and notice the tiniest movement in your body. A soft release behind the eyes, a slackening in the tongue, a new warmth in a hand. Those are the signals the grid reads. Hold them without forcing interpretation. We will resume with the grounder and the integrator next, and then move into a deeper mechanical layering, how thresholds open, how to recognize a durable window, and one final activation that, if you choose it, can serve as a bridge. For now, sit with what you already feel, the faint hum, the tilt of attention, the question of whether you want a different tempo. If you do, the work ahead is simple and disciplined. Choose steady acts, not frantic remedies. Translate vision into footwork, and, above all, let authenticity be the short path through the noise. The grounder arrives like a slow tide. If the visionary sketches horizons, the grounder is the hand that sets the first stone. These souls carry stability as their primary gift. They are the ones who can be trusted to show up, to finish the sentence, to make shelter out of scraps. The Arcturian lattice reads certain quiet fingerprints when this architecture is present. A steady breath under pressure, a natural attention to material detail even in abstract conversation, and an instinct to anchor others by creating structure. But the mirror also shows where the gift can harden, chronic stagnation disguised as caution, a fear of risk that keeps potential from moving, or an inner complaint that life is too slow. I remember River, who worked with heavy machinery in a small coastal town. He was the person colleagues turned to when deadlines threatened to unravel. He kept projects moving by designing simple, practical systems. His chest held a patient calm. Yet River's own wishes waited in a drawer, a sketchbook of ideas he said he didn't have time for. The lattice reflected River's steady cadence as both safety and friction. When he carried his gift as service, the field drew reliable partners, suppliers who honored his lead, apprentices who wanted to learn his way. When he nested in safety to avoid risk, the mirror showed small, repeating delays, calls that never returned, opportunities that slipped from his hands as if the field assumed he wasn't ready. Micro-activation for the grounder. Sit with your feet firmly on the floor. Breathe in through the nose for 3 counts. Hold for 1. Exhale for 5. Place both hands over the place where your lowest ribs meet the abdomen. Imagine a slow, green root unfurling from that point into the earth. Not a fantasy of escape, but a felt line of support. On the exhale, whisper inwardly, "I am rooted and ready." Repeat 8 times. Then stand and shift your weight from one foot to the other, noticing the subtle difference in balance. After the practice, walk deliberately to the nearest window or door and name one small physical task you will complete in the next hour. Breathe, notice the feet, and return to your day. How the grid mirrors the grounder. When River practiced small, daily acts that honored both caution and desire, sketching for 15 minutes each morning, or calling one potential collaborator monthly, the lattice began to reciprocate with opportunities that matched his rhythm, steady contracts with predictable timelines, apprentices who brought enthusiasm and discipline. When River's roots became entanglement and unwillingness to shift, the mirror slowed, meetings rescheduled indefinitely, projects that required nimbleness slipping away. The grid reflects whether your grounding supports movement or resists it. Journaling prompt for the grounder. List 3 tiny actions that would make you feel both steady and alive. Example reflection. I will sketch for 10 minutes each morning and send 1 cold email every Friday. Notice whether writing these small commitments feels like a release or a tightening in the chest. The integrator is the pattern that synthesizes contradiction. This is the soul that can hold paradox without needing to resolve it into certainty. The Arcturian signatures for an integrator are subtle: a tolerance for ambiguity, a capacity to hold multiple perspectives at once, and a tendency to absorb opposing charges as if they were data points rather than threats. Integrators often carry the strain of translation. They are social lubricants, mediators, and sometimes secret repositories for other people's unresolved tensions. The mirror will honor this range when it is used skillfully. It will amplify fragmentation when the integrator overburdens the self with other people's contradictions. There was a woman in Lale who could sit in a room and listen to 2 people at odds, and after an hour, offer each of them a phrasing that made the other breathe. Her friends called her the bridge, but privately she felt thin in the center, as if her own preferences had become negotiable. The lattice read generosity with gratitude, but it also registered a pattern of self-erasure. When Lale practiced boundarying as an act of care, saying, I can hold this, but I need an hour to resettle, the field returned more balanced engagements. When she kept everything folded in, the lattice reflected confusion, requests left vague, partners who expected emotional labor without reciprocity. Microactivation for the integrator. Find a quiet chair. Place one hand on your heart and the other on your belly. Breathe into both hands at once, feeling the expansion in the chest and the belly. On the inhale, imagine a silver thread connecting your heart and belly. On the exhale, imagine that thread widening into a gentle ribbon that can hold 2 truths. Say inwardly, I hold paradox with clarity. Repeat 5 cycles. Afterward, write 1 sentence that honors a contradictory part of your life, something like, I want stability and I want adventure. Notice how the sentence feels in your body.
Ground by rubbing your palms together and placing them on your thighs. How the grid mirrors the integrator. When Lale practiced saying her limits and then returning to hold conversation, the lattice reflected reciprocal clarity. People offered practical solutions instead of emotional dumping. Meetings became more functional. When she continued to smooth over conflict at the cost of herself, the mirror skewed toward ambiguity, invitations that lacked clarity, relationships that assumed her emotional bandwidth without offering support. The field matches the architecture it reads. Synthesis without boundaries invites overload. Synthesis with clear edges births durable connection. Journaling prompt for the integrator. Write 1 paragraph describing the paradox you most often hold, then underline 1 sentence that feels like an actionable boundary. Example reflection. I can listen to my partner's worries without taking them on. My boundary, I will take 20 minutes after any heavy talk to resettle. A few short sketches will show how these last 2 patterns often mark a tipping point. A person I will call Talia integrated vision and care in her work as a community organizer. She learned to alternate days of deep outreach with days of internal bookkeeping and rest. The lattice began to honor her with reliable volunteers and occasional funding that matched the community's tempo. Another person, Mateo, who carried only grounding without translation, found his contract steady but uninspiring. When he invited a visionary collaborator and practiced small acts of risk, the field offered serendipitous alignments that nudged his steady life into fertile new shape. These stories are not proof. They are invitations to experiment with the architecture of your habit. Now we move into a broader mechanical layer, not new doctrine, but a practical map that clarifies what the Arcturian grid most readily responds to and why so many sincere practices stumble. You have already heard the phrase state not story, but we will sit with it more precisely. State is the felt quality you maintain between practices, the way you breathe while you answer emails, the tone beneath your speech when you hang up the phone, the consistent posture of attention you carry into your relationships. Story is the narrative you tell about yourself or your life. I am the seeker. I have bad luck. I must fix others. Story can motivate, but it is usually processed through the same neural grooves each time you revisit it. The lattice maps waveforms, not sentences. It reads persistent oscillation more accurately than episodic rhetoric. Think of state as the current under the surface of the river, and story as the color of the leaves floating on top. You can shout at the leaves, rewrite your story, but if the current remains the same, next morning the same leaves will drift by again.
Practices that change surface phenomena without attending to the current often show immediate but brief effects. Practices that modulate the current, small, repeated acts that alter the baseline tone of attention, breath, and physiological calibration, invite the lattice to reconfigure its mirror. 3 practical conclusions follow from this. 1. Small repetition beats dramatic intervention. A daily 3-minute coherence routine practiced for months will likely outpace an intense weekend ceremony followed by neglect. The grid reads repetition as evidence of commitment, not mere spectacle. 2. Authenticity is the shortest path. If a practice feels imposed, like I should do this because someone said so, you are wearing an energetic costume. The lattice reads that mismatch quickly. Choose acts that feel embodied, even if they seem small or imperfect. 3. Translation matters. Vision without footwork leaves you floating. Ground without bridge building leaves you stuck. The lattice prefers a bridge between inner state and outer step. A short guided exercise to test state versus story. Sit quietly and bring to mind a recurring complaint you have about your life. Notice the physical shape of the complaint. Does it live in the throat, chest, or stomach? Now sit with your breath. Inhale 4, exhale 6. On the inhale, feel the complaint as an object in your hands. On the exhale, imagine placing it on a shelf for 3 breaths. Notice how the body responds. Then write one small, plausible action you can take in the next 48 hours that bridges present sensation in a practical step. The point is not to deny the complaint, but to locate where it sits in your instrument and then translate that position into a tiny, repeatable act. We should also look at how mirroring shows up in daily life in practical terms, because that helps you test hypotheses rather than worship signs. Mirroring commonly appears as patterns. People whose energy aligns with yours arrive. Messages that echo your inner state appear in ordinary channels. Timing shifts, delays, or accelerations occur around your projects. Here are 3 accessible mirrors and what they may indicate. Repetition of specific information, a phrase, song, image, often signals a refining of attention. Your inner field is tuning to a theme, and the lattice passes the theme into your consensual reality to see how you respond. Social tone matching. If people you interact with become calmer after you practice coherence, that suggests your field is stabilizing and attracting similar frequencies. If their reactivity increases, you may be carrying unprocessed charge that the lattice simply reflects. Synchronicities that lead to micro-opportunities. These are practical. A message that advances a project, a stranger who knows someone you need. The appearance of such mirrors often scales with the duration and fidelity of your state. I will offer 2 short anonymous sketches to illustrate mirroring in action. 1. A Maya who practiced morning breath coherence for 5 minutes daily, and then sent one concise email each day about a collaboration idea, started receiving invitations to small, manageable projects that matched her new tempo. 2. Ben, who relied on weekend ecstatic work without daily integration, found his life oscillating between intense breakthroughs and long, flattened stretches where little practical momentum remained. These are not moral tales, they are feedback loops. Now consider threshold windows. I have used the word threshold repeatedly because the Arcturian lattice seems to open pockets of increased responsiveness, moments when small acts produce outsized mirroring. Thresholds are rare, but they are measurable. The signs are often both internal and external: an intensified sense of presence, a clear ring of awareness in the center of the chest, compressed or elongated time, unusually vivid dreams that feel like previews, and a string of small coincidences that point toward a single theme or decision.
Emotionally, thresholds tend to carry a tightness paired with exhilaration, as if the system is compressing into a new shape. A threshold is an invitation point. The stakes are opportunity, not coercion. Choosing to step through a threshold does not guarantee a predetermined outcome. It increases the probability of accelerated mirroring in whichever direction you embody. Sometimes the threshold asks for stepping back and integrating. Sometimes it asks for a bold, small-facing leap. The Arcturians describe these windows as times when the lattice reads your state with increased sensitivity, so the fidelity of your action in that window matters more than at ordinary times. How to know whether to act? Ask 2 short questions and notice where the answer settles in the body. Question 1. Does this move feel like expansion or escape? Question 2. Can I translate this impulse into one small reversible step? If the body answers with a steady yes in the chest to both, the threshold likely favors action. If the answer feels jagged or located only in the head, the lattice may need more embodied fidelity before the window stabilizes. Before offering the closing activation, I will share 2 short testimonials that show different outcomes of threshold engagement. The first, Nadim felt a threshold as a hum in his throat while commuting. He responded with a small, clear action, sending 1 paragraph to an old collaborator proposing a pilot. Within 2 weeks, he had a meeting and a modest grant. The lattice had amplified the small step he took in a threshold moment. The second, Rena experienced a similar hum but leapt to a grand, irreversible decision without any small tests. The result was chaotic and instructive. She learned to create micro-steps first. Both experiences were legitimate. Both taught fidelity.
This brings us to a final singular activation, a bridge practice designed to be offered at a threshold. You may choose to make this public in the form of a typed anchor, or you may hold it privately. This is your second and final optional public phrase in this transmission. If you feel called, and only if you feel called, you may type, "I step into Arcturian coherence." Mark it optional and optional public. If you choose to type it once and then breathe with the following centering sequence. If you do not type it, simply say it inwardly. Activation. Sit with a straight spine and place your hands on your knees. Close your eyes. Inhale 4, pause 1, exhale 6. Repeat this cycle 3 times. On the 4th inhale, imagine a thin, luminous band at the center of your chest. On the exhale, feel that band expand to a ring that encircles your torso. On the next inhale, allow that ring to pulse outward gently, as if sending a ripple through a calm pool. If you are typing the anchor, do so now. I step into Arcturian coherence. Then breathe 3 times and place both feet flat, pressing them into the floor. Name aloud or inwardly 1 small reversible step you will take in the next 48 hours that translates this felt ring into action. A message, a meeting, a single practical task. Breathe, notice your body, and when ready, open your eyes. Safety and centering. After any activation, breathe slowly and press the soles of your feet into the ground for 5 counts. Smile gently. Drink a glass of water within the next 20 minutes. If any activation brings intense emotion or overwhelm, allow yourself to stop, to call a trusted person, or to rest. Nothing in these practices replaces medical or psychological care. If you are curious about extended support for maintaining threshold windows and stabilizing new baselines, there is a member circle that offers a voluntary container. It is an option, not a requirement. The circle provides field holding and additional transmissions should you want to deepen the work. 3 concrete benefits the circle offers are regular field activations designed to be practiced across weeks, extended transmissions that deepen baseline, small group calls where members practice mutual coherence exercises together, peer field support and accountability, and a repository of recorded micro-practices tailored to each of the 7 soul architectures, practical tools you can use anytime. Joining the circle can help sustain the frequency, but it is not the only legitimate path. Many people shift timelines with self-guided practice and small communities of care. If you feel called and want support, you may click Join. Membership terms are optional and clearly listed on the platform. Choose what matches your capacity. Before we close, here is a recommended week of practice, a compact, practical sequence you can use to test whether daily fidelity shifts the lattice for you.
Each day's practice is brief and accessible. Day 1, calibration. Morning, 5 minutes of breath calibration. Inhale 4, hold 2, exhale 6. Name 1 plausible intention. Midday, do a micro-activation for your primary soul pattern, 20 to 60 seconds. Evening, 1 paragraph journaling about any mirror. Day 2, translation. Morning, calibration plus 1 small to-do tied to your vision. Write 1 email, draft 1 outline. Midday, a grounding walk of 5 minutes, noticing feet. Evening, note 1 small synchronicity or near miss.
Day 3, containment. Morning, breath, and the keeper-healer activation if that resonates. Midday, practice saying one boundary phrase aloud to yourself. Evening, journal 2 things you did not absorb emotionally. Day 4, bridge. Morning, visionary plus grounder alternation. 3 cycles horizon, 3 cycles feet. Midday, do one physical task that moves a project forward. Evening, note who showed up in response. Day 5, repeat plus reflection. Morning, calibration, and a 1-sentence update to your intention based on earlier results. Midday, 10-minute creative or practical session, sketching, coding, calling. Evening, write a short reflection listed as small mirrors. Day 6, field test. Morning, perform the activation you felt strongest with. Midday, offer a small act of service bounded with a recovery plan. Evening, note energetic cost and replenishment. Day 7, integration. Morning, longer breath practice, 10 minutes with the ring visualization. Midday, translate one insight into a plan for the week ahead. Evening, gratitude list of 3 small wins. These practices are tools, not truisms. They are designed to test fidelity rather than to enforce dogma. Over the week, record small mirrors, messages that matter, people who respond differently, or internal changes in tension and clarity. Keep the experiment light and curious. A few final vignettes to carry. One person, Sam, discovered that steady daily micro-practices reduced his social anxiety enough that he could say no to one draining commitment. The lattice responded by opening up a consistent collaborator who matched his new tone. Another, Lan, discovered that the most persistent change came not from spectacular events, but from the small repeated act of writing one honest line in her journal each night. The Arcturian grid for many people prefers constancy. It rewards the quiet fidelity of practice more than the dramatic fireworks of intensity without follow-through. If you have been feeling that soft hum, that loosened jaw, that curious tightening behind the eyes, know this: you were detected because something about your waveform matched a node on the lattice. Detection is not a verdict, it is an invitation. You may respond by small authentic acts, or you may wait. Both are valid choices. The work is to notice what your body says about those choices. Let your breath be the referee.
If you choose to join the circle, it can be a field where you practice with others, receive extended activations, and access ongoing recordings tuned to each of the 7 souls. If you do not join, that is an entirely respectable path. The field is wide. Let us close with a short centering that returns you fully to your instrument. Sit or stand. Place both feet on the floor. Inhale 4, exhale 6. Bring your attention to the soles of the feet and wiggle your toes. If you typed either anchor, notice where the letters rest in your chest. Place one hand over your heart and one hand on your belly. Offer a quiet sentence of gratitude for the breath, for the question, for the small capacity to experiment. Breathe 3 more times, and when you are ready, open your eyes. Thank you for allowing this transmission to find you. If this finds you, you were identified by the Arcturians, and whether you step through now or later, the lattice continues to respond to your steady fidelity.